I just parked at Albertsons. It is packed. I've never seen it this full in my entire life.
Well, I went to the top of the mountain to see the wise man there. And I asked him why this world we live in is filled with sorrow and care. And he looked me over and up and down, then he shook his head real slow. He said, son, you've come to the wrong man. That's one thing I sure don't know.
Alright, so I'm going to cover up this mulberry because the squirrels are getting rid of the leaves. But I wanted to talk about accessibility. So I just went to Albertsons to grab some Girl Scout cookies, and I realized how packed they are. The parking lot was swamped, and I decided to walk through just to see kind of what was going on. And aisles are getting cleared out. It's pretty intense, and this is, of course, going on because of COVID-19, the coronavirus. And I want to talk about this, not because I want to just add to the noise, but to maybe suggest some things that people might not be thinking about, and that's talking about access and privilege.
Well, I stayed up there on the mountain a while to see what I could see. And I looked out over this whole wide world in its awesome majesty. But then my gaze fell down to the city and the fires and the smoke below. And I shook my head and asked myself, now where did our garden go?
So a lot of people are stocking up. There's a lot of fear going around. And I was actually talking with a nurse practitioner, and one thing that she mentioned that I thought was really important was talking about how our culture around food is playing a role in all of this. And one of the things that we were talking about is essentially about how industrialized food, industrialized agriculture, over the years, it's encouraged us to get more distance from our food. So fewer of us have an understanding of exactly where our food comes from and what it takes to get to where we get it from. So what it takes for food to go from seed in the field to the things that we harvest, so the fruits, the leaves, things like that, to get to the grocery store, to get to us. And what that means is that if we don't know where our food comes from or how it's getting there, then we don't really have an understanding of what it's going to take for more food to show up and when that food is going to be available. And one of the things that she suggested is that this might essentially trigger the return of victory gardens, which I am working really hard to relearn my history, because history has never been something that has stuck with me very well. I was not big into history in school, but essentially victory gardens, they were these gardens that people were encouraged to plant in their private residences, in their front yards, and public spaces during World War I and World War II to help alleviate the stress on the agricultural system in the US during the war. And so where that might play a role in times like this is when there's so much stress and anxiety and economic tumult that increases food insecurity, that creates food shortages. If we all had more food around us, then it wouldn't necessarily be quite as impactful, it wouldn't be quite as scary. But that's where I wanted to talk about privilege and access, because I am incredibly privileged. This is not my property. This is the land I grew up on, but it's not my property. But I have the privilege of having tons of space to grow food on. Not everyone has that privilege, and there are a lot of people in the homestead community, the permaculture community, the back to the land community, who like to say that, oh, anyone can grow a garden. All you need is a windowsill and some seeds. And yes, almost anyone has the ability, the mental ability to learn. Most people have the physical ability to perform the tasks that it takes to do some very basic gardening. But so many people don't have the time to learn, don't have the space because they don't even own the space that they're living in. And what you could grow on a kitchen windowsill, it'll help and it feels good and that's awesome, but it won't feed a family. So this is where I want to encourage people who have more to maybe take a look at that. And let's not put so much pressure on being individually sustainable, like each to our own, like watch your own back, all of that, because it's not sustainable and it doesn't help our neighbors and it doesn't help the community recover.
Came down off of the mountain and walked back to my street. I talked with all my friends and neighbors and anyone else I'd meet, and said I don't know how it got this way, but I know one thing for sure: if we want it to get any better, we're the only source of the cure.
Everything that's going on with this virus right now, this is where I want to encourage us all to check our privilege and see what we can do to help. There are many of us out here who are losing work, who are struggling to pay the bills, who for instance, Olivia and I went out grocery shopping the other day and we went to get toilet paper, and as many of you know, people are stocking up on toilet paper. And I'm a contract worker and we don't make a lot of money, and part of that is by design and also part of that is access. And when we went to get toilet paper, there just was not our usual toilet paper available, and the only toilet papers that we could find, and this is with an added note that, like, we were looking for recycled toilet paper, and so we weren't shopping at like Costco where they have all different types, but even at Trader Joe's, they were completely out of the recycled one, which is the cheaper one. And the only other one available was significantly more expensive. And so with everyone stocking up on things like this, and with my work being affected by the necessity of having to social distance, having to not be creating big gatherings, it hit us in the pocketbook this week, and it has made us have to think about how we're going to afford the different foods that we can't grow for ourselves. So with all of that said, this is where I want to encourage people with more privilege, more access, to look at what we can do.
'Cause if you climb to the top of that mountain and you speak to the wise man there, once you ask him why this world we live in is filled with sorrow and care, and once he looks you over and shakes his head and tells you that he just don't know, he'll say, that's not the important question, my friend. Ask, how does my garden grow?
So we all have different privileges and different struggles, different ways that we are impacted by economic crisis and by diseases like this. So a few ways that we can check our privilege are looking at what we have to give and examining what we really need. If you don't need to stock up on all of the things, if you can afford to buy the more expensive things when there's a shortage, maybe think about not stocking up quite so much. If you have land and food, maybe think about who you can give that to. So for instance, I, right now, have a lot of arugula, we have a lot of herbs, and we have a lot of oranges. So if you are anywhere in the Inland Empire, Southern California, Riverside County region, pretty much anywhere from like Temecula to Riverside, if you are struggling with access to work, with your hours being cut, if you're struggling with access to food and you can't afford fresh foods right now, hit me up. I'd be happy to bring you oranges and arugula. So that's one thing we can do, is we can share our abundance. And so for anyone with the privilege of growing food, maybe check in with your neighbors, maybe post on social media. There's also 2 great apps for sharing the abundance that you have. There's Olio and Crop Swap, and they're both apps where you can essentially just upload the extra food you have, and people can message you and say, hey, I'd love some of that. So that's one way you can tap in to your community in a way that helps and serves and makes it so that everyone can navigate this a little bit more comfortably. If you have the privilege of having extra money, maybe think about the different ways that you can use that to benefit your community and to benefit people in more need. Some other ways that you can help in your community are by maybe you don't have access to land, but you are privileged enough to have the knowledge of how to grow food. Maybe check in with your city and see if you can help grow edible foods in your parks. Maybe plant community fruit trees, or tap in with a neighbor that maybe has land but might not have the time or ability or even money to grow food there, and maybe ask them if you could help them plant a garden that could be shared between the both of you or even amongst your community.
Now some of us are just too busy, and a few of us just don't care. And some are fighting battles so hard they haven't got anything to spare. But if we just put our hands together and set aside our fears, the children of our children's children might thank us in a couple of 100 years.
And one really big one, if you have the privilege of being able to vote, maybe look at the different things going on this election year and future election years and think about where your values truly lie. Think about maybe how you feel about healthcare and about being able to help others around you by making sure everyone has access to healthcare. Maybe think about growing food and the politics around growing food and ways that you can make local homegrown or local small farms thrive more. Maybe tap into your farming community and see with your small farmers, hey, what would help you? What's on the ballot right now? What candidates do you think would help you thrive, as opposed to furthering this system where we are so dependent on industrialized agriculture? And maybe when you're voting, think about access to land and who controls the land around you. Maybe look to your local and state officials and see what they're doing about publicly owned land, if it's being used for the benefit of large corporations that are furthering the distance that we have between ourselves and our communities, between ourselves and our food. And maybe look at, okay, who would help us have more local food, more local security, better local systems that will help the people in need the most. So yeah, with all this going on, I just want to encourage you to think about the ways that you can calmly enact change, and thinking about that for now and the future. Yeah, so food for thought. This is obviously a serious thing going on right now, and we should all be taking our reasonable precautions. But where we're able to, where we have the privilege to, let's maybe think about how we can help others get through this as well. And let's think about how we can calmly enact change now and in the future so that we can all be a little better taken care of. And I would love to hear your thoughts as well, if you have any more ways to add, especially of how we can help each other and how we can make our communities feel a little bit more secure in times like this. Definitely leave a comment. I would love to get a conversation going. And remember, we always want to be respectful and kind. So, yeah, let's start a conversation.
So go to the top of that mountain, see what you can see. If you run to that wise old man up there, please say hello from me. But I won't be going with you, not in this or any year. 'Cause everything you see needs doing up there can only be done down here.
Oh, and just to clarify, I wrapped up this tree because the squirrels are getting it. It's a mulberry tree that I'm really excited about, and it grows really fast and really strong, except when the squirrels eat all of its leaves. And for the most part, I try and grow things that don't need to be babied, don't need to be taken care of so intensely. But I kind of figure if this is something that I can baby just a little bit, just while it gets established, and then it'll just grow like a weed, that would be awesome. And to me, that's worth it. I'm not really a purist about anything. But yeah, let's start a conversation. Put a comment below if you have any thoughts to add. I'll also be over on Instagram. And I would love to hear from you. Have a great day, guys.